most of the time when we do research in environmental economics, we are looking at things like forests, we are looking at things like water bodies, we are looking at air pollution, we are looking at degradations of Sundarbans, etc., etc. One really doesn't talk very much in this country about urban economic problems, which are now gaining ground, and it's soon that we should have in every university a course on urban economics or urban environmental economics, which becomes very, very important. It's in that context that I expressed an interest in looking, and I'm just beginning my research in urban environmental problems. I told that to Amita. I said, I'm not a great expert on pedestrianization or anything of the sort. But she said, no, but since you're looking at these problems, why don't you just give us a general feel for the whole subject? As she also told you that I come from an institutional economics background, you probably don't understand what that means. Well, institutions are not organizations, but institutions are rules of the game. Institutions are customs, traditions, what we build into our behavioral traits of a society. And that forms a great part of what we are today and why we behave the way we do. And unless we try to understand these institutional foundations, we can't really understand the problems of why we need to have this, why do we need to address pedestrianization in the first place? Why did this problem come up? And how do we get over these kind of problems? It's that background of institutions, coupled with the ideas that institutional habits and behavior at some point of time have to be regulated. One can't behave as he pleases in a society. And there are, of course, societal rules, there are societal norms, but apart from that, there are other kinds of restrictions that we have. We have legal restrictions. And those legal restrictions, the laws of the land, are meant to guide our behavior in certain ways and not guide our behavior in other ways. An example, quick example is, we are not allowed to sell blood. Why? It's a question that one can ask. We are only allowed to donate blood. We are not allowed to sell blood. There is an economic reason behind this. I'm not going to go into that. I'm sure if you think a little, you'll understand why we have this kind of laws. In similar ways, there are other laws that regulate us. So therefore, law and economics naturally enters the picture if I start looking at economic behavior from this kind of a background. The scene before you is not at all unfamiliar to us. We actually live in this kind of a situation where you see a lot of things here. A lot of things can be gleaned from this image that you see there. You see that people are walking on the roads. You see that there are certain kinds of vehicles parked on the sides of the roads. And you also notice that there are some shops on the road, on the sides of the roads. So what you see is, you see people being pushed onto the road itself to walk. It's a very telling picture of what's to come. Now, pedestrianization. It's a new word that's being used. And I will quickly say that pedestrianization is not really what we are looking for in India, because this is a very, very specific term. It's a very specific definition, which I'll come to you later. It's an end result of a process in which actually we don't allow any kind of vehicles, motorized vehicles, to ply the road. So I'm not going to really look at that. In fact, I think the consortiums of the walkability people, they must be knowing most of what I'm going to say today. So it's that aspect of walkability that is more important to me. So, but I put this as issues and challenges. So my title is a little different from this, because unless we put this in a context, it doesn't make sense to just give you some economic model and say this is the number and this is the value and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't do anything to us. We'll look at these numbers and then we'll go away without anything. I'm trying to look at the issues and challenges. For that, we need to put this into a larger context. And the larger context for all of us, it's a very sobering set of data that I'm going to present to you, of course, is the idea of urbanization. Urbanization itself is a very big phenomena that's happening globally. And why is it so important? Well, by 2007 itself, we have crossed a tipping point in urbanization globally. More than half of the world's population were living in urban areas. And this is going to go up. So urbanization is something that's come to stay. We can't stop this. 60% of the world's population will be urbanized by 2030. 60% of the total world population will now live in cities. So what you're going to have is an explosion of cities becoming mega cities, bigger and bigger and bigger cities. And with that kind of urbanization happening, obviously there are certain demands that have to be made by the people who live in these cities. And this, one of the most important things for people who live in cities is travel, transport, travel, walking about, or moving from a point A to point B. The larger is the city, the more is the problem. The bigger is the problem, isn't it? So what I'm cutting out other environmental aspects, we can talk about the creation of slums and the sprawl, urban sprawl, poverty. Lots of things can be talked about in an urban. It's a huge elephant. I'm only looking at the trunk, maybe, or the tail, whatever you choose it to be. Of course, this is the source. I always mention my sources. I don't pretend that I have done this research by myself. I always quote sources. Look at Indian situation. By 2030, 40% of the Indian population will live in cities. That's a huge number considering the population of India, right? May not be doesn't look very big, but it is. One of the important things that, as I said, is that the vehicular traffic growth, because of the demand for transport when people live in cities, rises. And it is growing at the rate of 8 to 12% per annum in this country. It's a huge number. Now it has overtaken our GDP growth also. So the demand for traffic, vehicular traffic, it grows so much. And this is by the Urban Transport Standing Committee on Urban Development, our own government of India. What are the consequences of this? Well, there are spin-offs, there are good spin-offs, there are bad spin-offs. There are always negative externalities of actions and there are positive externalities of action. One of them is accidents that happen in these countries.